Good. Good. I just rushed back inside because I was trying to move my car in preparation for Long Beach street sweeping. And I was 100% parked illegally all day.
Did you get a ticket?
Yesterday, so I was like, fine? What's that?
You didn't get a ticket? You were fine?
No, I was like, I'm gonna take the chance. It's Sunday. Like I parked last night. I was like, I'm gonna take a shot. It's Sunday. I just have to make sure I move my car before Monday rolls around. And yeah, somebody stole the parking spot I was looking for. So then I had to drive around in a rage for about 30 seconds until I found another. How are you, Naomi?
I'm okay. I had a kind of a tough personal thing this week, but
working through it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that we are live streaming right now, or else I'd ask about it if you wanted to talk about it, but I also, maybe you don't, and maybe it's great that we're live streaming. Hello, Courtney.
Hello.
Hi, Courtney.
Hi.
We're just checking in. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. I know. Crazy. Although I'm kind of glad it's been a minute because the shoot's been really a lot. It's like, yeah. Tomorrow's a week.
Right.
Someone is watching right now. I just want you to know, like, this is the first time whoever is watching.
Hello.
You're the first person who has ever watched these meetings live.
It's a good one.
Exciting. I hope you're nice.
It might be a robot.
It might be a robot. Oh, do robots watch live streams? I mean, I watch just, I know, as a
nothing's off the table with robots,
right?
I'll let you know if we get
that's
comments.
watching.
Yeah. I also can moderate comments if people want to chat. Oh, their name is Gina Party, and they're a writer producer, and they say hi.
Hello.
Hi, Gina. You're not a robot at all. Hey, Gina.
Gina, this is so weird for us, or just me. But thank you.
Thanks for being here. Wild.
Yeah. So Liz, what's up with you? What's the new news with you?
Well, other than being very pregnant, I had some things that I wanted to talk about today that have nothing to do with pregnancy, but that are along the lines of financing. And it would be best maybe if we start broaching. I don't want to cut off personal chit chat. I'm just very bad at it. So I tend to shorten the time. But if anyone else has something they want to say about how they're feeling, maybe they should say that now before we talk about financing.
That was like a scene from a sitcom. Like,
Courtney, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm tired, I guess. Been on this feature. Yesterday was day 8. Yeah, and then I went to Atlanta Film Festival for my short, like on our first weekend off. So that was crazy. Yeah, the feature's been interesting. Yeah, we were doing like splits the last 3 days, so call time was like 3 p.m. Yeah, which I don't know that we really need to have done, because somehow magically when we were like, you're not allowed to do this anymore, you have to figure out, because originally it was like full nights and we are like, well, you're not allowed. It has to be splits, figure it out day for night. Magically, suddenly everyone knew how to do it. Yeah, so working on that. But it's been interesting because the lead producer's background is more in like casting and like knowing everyone and contracts and like all that stuff. And my background's crew. So it's been an interesting, like, to see where we overlap, and then things that like I know that she doesn't necessarily. And like, yeah, it's just been an interesting, like now that we're actually shooting, just to see how your background changes the way you like understand or approach like set and production and the communication and the way things are done. So yeah, I did my little like pep talk stuff with because our director is like a newer director too. So the first day I was able to get to set, I was like, go do this, go step in. If you don't like this Dutch angle, like go say that. Why don't you tell them now? Like, which I think helps for the shoot going forward. But so yeah, it's just been really interesting to see like how your experience plays out on set and the way you set things up. So yeah. All I got.
Did I see that one of your like crazy fast cheap features got into a festival? Was that on social?
I don't think so.
Maybe it was your short and I got confused.
Yeah, my short played Atlanta, which is awesome. Atlanta's a great festival. Their audiences are cool.
Yeah.
And the program is really interesting. Big fan of Atlanta. Yeah, so I went to that, and then there was a Deadline article about the feature I'm line producing right now that came out recently. For whatever reason, I don't know. This is like our second. They're like, no, they're shooting, and I'm like, I don't know why this is news, but okay, cool, great. Yeah.
Okay, Liz, I think we are ready
I think we're ready
to dive in.
We made it past the 10 human minutes.
I mean, 9. We did really well. Just because Gina's watching and because we've never had anyone watch, I just want to contextualize where we are for her, even maybe in anyone else who watches this later. But just really quickly, Gina, these are really loosely organized meetings in that we don't come with an agenda. We update each other about the state of our projects. And the topic for today is financing and looking ahead to how we're going to fund our film. But just so you're prepared, we're probably not going to solve the question of how we're going to finance our films in the next 51. Maybe we will. Sorry, don't mean to curb
Open
us.
question, Liz.
But again,
Don't shoot us in the leg before we stepped out of the gate.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about is that I'm actually entertaining investor conversations right now for my film. And been talking with my producers for weeks about our equity structure and whether to bring crew into equity.
Mm-hmm.
And we came up with a structure that I mean, I've even shared with Alicia via email that I like, and I'm happy to go into it. But I met with my DP last week, and I don't think she wants to be brought into equity. I don't think she's excited about it at all. And so now we're kind of confused because we're like, oh, we really need to test whether crew is interested in that. And then our plan for MFN, which I've always used Most Favored Nations for every single project, she brought up that ethically she may be questioning MFN because some people deserve more.
I also have my personal thing with MFN as someone who AD'd for so long is that MFN's not actually MFN because everyone who brings gear is actually making more money because they've got kit fees, they've got their lights. So the people who are working the most hours, like your production team, are getting paid less technically for their time because they're getting paid the same rate, but they're not getting any tax rate, because a kit fee is something you already own and you're getting paid like non-taxed for it. But if you're working like 20 hours a day as the first AD in prep, like you're actually getting paid, like underpaid for that. So I don't like MFN for that reason, personally.
That kind of blew my mind. I was like, we're trying to be fair and we want everyone to get the same rate. And she was like, well, people who come on who are new, who haven't spent years training and learning what I've learned, is it right that we should be getting the same rate? So I just want to acknowledge that we're thrown for a loop right now. And that I'd love to entertain some sort of conversation about whether we're going to be crowdfunding as a team or not. It'd be nice to gauge interest as part of this call.
I think just before we move on to crowdfunding, the question of equity, as far as the crew not wanting to be involved, at least your DP, not speaking for everyone, of course, but that might be sort of a hint as to what could come. And I think that's really interesting. And I wonder if it's more based on the idea of there being any actual money
Yeah.
to come from it. And it's like, what is the purpose of having these conversations when the return on investment is this magical thing that I'm not actually going to see any dollars from? So I wonder if when approaching things like equity, if you need to have an actual sales pitch for your crew in order to show like, this is actually where money would come from. This is how I intend to make back, excuse me, the budget and etc. Like, you have to pitch them like you would other investors in order to show that it's not just, yeah, there's some money coming one day, maybe.
Yeah.
We have our lawyer, sorry, one of my producers is a lawyer, and she wrote up some loose language for our waterfall, which I can incorporate as part of the sales pitch. Sorry, there's one last part of this, is that I actually I have a theatrical booker now for the film, and he may want to work with all of us, and it may be a conversation for now or a conversation for later. But I think that's going to be a part of what you're talking about, Alicia, is like, we already have like this well-established veteran theatrical booker who has global relationships. And by the way, you're not 5 items down in the waterfall. You're right at the top, right?
Mhm.
We are experiencing a little bit of pushback from from private equity investor prospects, which I think we all anticipated too. So it's just like a fun little, how much will my conviction buy me in these scenarios? We'll see.
Well, and I think Alicia's so right about like any piece that we're going to try to move on the chessboard here is going to require a massive amount of like pitching the people on like why things can actually be different, because everything feels so entrenched, like how set works and who has power and who doesn't, and is there money, and it's and I think the crew is where the rubber always hits the road here, because if I was a crew person who could make $400 a day or whatever just up front, and then I don't have a problem, and then I don't have to worry about equity, why the hell would I change that model? Because it's working very well for those people. That I wonder if there like even has to be a bigger pitch about like, this current system is really badly exploiting some of us. Like, even if it's our projects, like we're not getting paid and you're getting paid and other people aren't getting paid. And I don't know. And certainly some people will be like, well, I'm still making $400 a day, so good luck to you. But maybe there will be people who might, buy into that argument.
And there's like day players and stuff too to factor in. Like if you're doing equity, it gets really complicated with like, you have a different dollar grip on day 6. And like next week, I found out this morning, I've got a different, like someone's switching themselves out for 4 days because they got on a commercial. So it's like, which is standard and fine, but it's just harder to, like, it's not like as simple as like breaking it down by how many people you have, because people are going to replace themselves last minute. And then it's like, figuring out what that means if there's equity involved. I think it's really complicated for the like, I've had like 2 people who've literally been on for 1 day on this one.
Or we're trying to develop a policy around that. By the way, we have 2 people watching now. Develop a policy around you have to commit to all of the days of the shoot. And if you get sick, things come up. And if you find a replacement, that's fine. But you have to go into this arrangement making the commitment. But what my DP is causing me to evaluate is not necessarily to double down, but actually to consider the plan of just bringing in producers in equity along with my investors, because I really think the core of what I've been battling with in indie film is that my producers do so much and they get nothing. They get nothing. And maybe that's the question or the problem that I want to draw attention to rather than the entire crew. But I haven't quite finalized where I'm coming from, just acknowledging the pain points that I'm experiencing in my conversations right now.
It's super interesting. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on the most favored nations question, because I think it's a great question.
Yeah, it seems so fair.
It does on paper, but it makes more sense. That's why it makes more sense for actors, because actors are doing, like, the actors in general are bringing a more equal thing to set. But yeah, it's like really just like the kit fees and the rental, like the gaffer on this feature is like renting us all the lights. Like they're definitely making more money than like anyone in production. And like technically it's a rental, but it's like it just gets really tricky with, especially on indies, when you're getting like renting things from people. But also like the hours too, right? Like technically you're paying like your first AD for 12-hour days, but they're also like available outside of those hours. Like things come up and there's like the schedule has to get changed and you can't do that when you're on set. So there's like more like labor and more just like time and availability, and you're working through lunch every day. Like your grips are not working through lunch, but everyone in production is working through lunch every day. So like technically you're working a half hour unpaid every day. So if you're getting paid the same as like people who are able to like hang out and nap in the truck or like be on their phone or whatever, that's like not the same. So it just like gets kind of like fuzzy with, like, technically you're on the clock for the same number of hours, but you're actually like doing more like work for that time. So
Right. It's like, do you bring the AD in to extra, to equity compensation, or is it just to be really, really firm on everyone taking a break and not, slipping in those moments?
Yeah, it's just tricky because then everyone's dependent. Then it's like everything slows down. So if you're not like looking at the prelim at lunch and no one's getting a call sheet until like, so at some point this work has to happen and you can't do it at the same time. So it's like inevitably you're going to be doing extra work every day. Like they're not things you can do in prep, and then prep is usually flat, or like you're not calculating the hours. So it's like supposed to work out that it all kind of does, but it's like you don't know what's going to come up. Like,
but you have a second usually, right? Or do you not have a second?
Yeah, the second will make the prelim and send it out, but you have to like look at it and approve it and make sure everyone else weighs in. Or like we've had to change our schedule now like twice during the shoot because things like came up, like something wasn't going to be ready for like wardrobe for the certain things. So we had to like flip days, and then the producer like put her foot down with the night sheets and we had to like shift things to be more split. Also, it was like a permitting thing. So like those things we couldn't have predicted, and then we had to deal with them, but everyone needs the schedule to like plan their own department. So you can't just be like, yeah, we'll like get it to you later. Like day 10 might become day 13. Like everyone needs it. So things like that are just tricky, and like you're coordinating, like shuttles before everyone's landing. So like if you're crew and you're just showing up and parking and getting on a shuttle, like fine, but someone has to make sure like the PA who's driving the shuttle is like there half an hour earlier, and like the house is unlocked and the location, someone's coming in and cleaning the location. And so you're offset technically by your schedule, but then you can't just like not be available. Like you can't just go home and be like, okay, bye, like good luck, hope it works out in the morning. Like you still have to kind of be in communication, even if you're like not on set still. So just it gets complicated with a smaller team because you can't just be like, okay, I'm clocking out, like there's someone else to take this over. It's like, I'm on a flat and I am doing 2 full-time jobs essentially. I want to talk to whoever decided line producing and UPMing could be one person. I have a lot of things to say to this. Whoever like decided that was the thing. But like I'm essentially constantly on call. Like I can't just not be like, whatever, I'm off the clock, figure it out, hope the actor gets picked up from the airport. Like you can't just do that. The show stops running, or like, someone broke some of our camera gear and I had to like figure that out, which means like waking up early on days that our call is 3 p.m. So it's just tricky for some of those things. Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way to do like a most favored nations scale where it's like the spirit of it is that everyone's getting paid the same, but then there are factors that are taken into account. Like what Courtney's talking, like that these people are going to end up working more hours every day, and therefore they get their day rate is higher.
Well,
That's and also the experience point is not wrong, like maybe is it most favored nations, like are there tiers?
That's what my DP wanted. She was like, not for me. And of course I'm like, don't say that. But she's like, not for me, but like for my gaffer and my best boy, like those are the people who at least as a gesture should get $50 more than other members of her team. And yes, I want to defer to the expertise of department heads, but it's also like, okay, well, I think there's an argument for every department that one or two members of the department deserve $50 more than everyone else. Like they're not an exception, right? Like, I mean, we've just heard Courtney say like all the ways that she kicks ass every day, like that should be acknowledged. So that it feels like a can of worms, right? Opening up tiers.
Well, I think that's where equity also comes in. Like I have equity in film. So like I am in theory more invested because of that for the film to do well, whereas people crewing like don't necessarily care, it's a job. But I'm like, okay, well, if we lose an hour of shooting because I didn't feel like waking up to like make sure the house got opened for people to land at, then that's a bigger. So there's like the equity as an incentive.
Yeah. As long as we do the good pitch, going back to the original. Yeah.
Right. It's very tricky.
What I'm working on right now is I've been talking with 2 web specialists, and I'm continuing to do this. And I'm trying to figure out a way to at least pitch my project and create a central hub website for the film to disseminate everything that we're going through in a quick pitch to audiences, and then separately to filmmakers. It's like, I remember Alicia when we talked like years ago, and we're like, are there 2 targets or is there 1 target? Is it filmmakers or is it the audiences or films? And I'm finding that I'm going to need to do case study transparency, the system is broken, pitch for my website, and then we're making a horror film, come along, let's engage, we're immersing you in this world for the film website. And it is becoming 2 separate streams of communication. I'm only bringing this up because it may be helpful to create these assets for each of our projects as a team on a website or our Patreon or our socials to kind of send people to as a reinforcement. So my plan is to potentially do like a very short direct address video for these things too. We'll see.
So you're currently planning to have 2 separate websites or one website with different portals depending on who is looking at it?
I think it's going to be because the designers, so I've been talking to, does anyone know Insaya Saeed? She co-directed, she started it with Nora Bogie. She's consulting with filmmakers about web copy, like artists about web copy and how to talk best about what they're doing. So my plan is to keep my Squarespace website for myself and have that be the place for case study, transparency, that, and then to hire someone to do a non-Squarespace, non-WordPress, polished and really nice website for the film where we can sell eventually downloads and streams from it, hook up to VHX, like connect in some way with other engagement and merch and e-commerce. I mean, if anyone has other ideas about what they're doing, I'd love to hear it, but that's my plan right now, is like 2 separate missions.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I think it's really smart to have a dedicated website for that film, but then there's the other part of me that is thinking about you, Liz, as your own brand, and then having to have separate websites for each project as it comes out. rather than a centralized place where people can go to find your projects and see, you know, especially since you were talking about self-distribution and I forget what you mentioned.
Just selling from our own website,
Yes, selling
cutting
from
out
your own
middlemen.
website,
Yeah.
etc. Like if I'm a fan of you, I would love to be able to just go to your site and be able to buy everything that I want to buy from you right there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't figured out a solution for that other than I can link to the film websites from my website. But like when I was talking to Insaya, she was like, your message is really muddled right now. Like, what do you do? Like, you do all these things I don't really understand. And you have like 45 tabs on your website. You know, it's like the clarity isn't there right now. So I'm trying to, I even am creating a homepage that's like, you know, not these words, but what do you want from me? Like, you know, consultant or filmmaker. And then you pick one and then you go to different places.
I've been thinking about exactly that same homepage for the last 3 months. I mean, with me, it would be like 4 different things, but yeah. Like, what are you here for? And then choose your own adventure.
Kind of like the wiki that Alicia, like it's like one gets you to another thing.
I mean, it's a little different because they're both in, I guess, more similar worlds, but my website, when you go to it, it's like director, producer, and then you pick one and then it goes to different, and then you can circle back if you want to see the other, but it's split that way. So you can do, I think too, if you have a, like the film, I think linking out to like the feature isn't a bad thing. And then when there's some kind of like visual thing to have there, to create it as a link that just like opens and it's a separate tab. So people aren't necessarily being completely directed away, but they have the option. But if there's crew specific things or it's for people working on it, you can also make a login for one of the tabs that's specific to people working on who are like have a different relationship with it, like an investor login or like a crew login or whatever. So it's still one website and it's in the same place, but it's not just open to the public. And then whoever's, you know, working on the film, or like if investor updates or things are going through the website, they get, you know, the password to log in to see all of that. So it's still centralized and it's not as spread out, but it's not like everything is all out there. Might be a solution too.
I was approached by I'm sorry, there is a design in my mind, but it feels like I'm all over the place when I say these things. I was approached by a company called Greenlit. They are trying to get in touch with filmmakers and distributors. They're essentially a digital camera for Web3, like a blockchain ledger. But and I've been talking with them, and I might do a partnership with them to do automatic disbursement of funds through them. And if any of you want to be connected with him either, like I'm working out like a very preferential deal compared to how much Cama costs normally, in exchange for, again, incorporating them as part of the Patreon and this process of talking about what it's like working with them. But sorry, your thing, Courtney, about like integrating investors made me think about, again, blockchain technology and automatic payment and integrating that into it somehow. Sorry, it's been a while since we talked, and I have these meetings like all the time, and I'm like, what have I forgotten? I just want to vomit it all out to you.
So I've had a radical change in thinking about funding my film since we last spoke. So whenever, is this a good time to share that?
Yes.
Okay. So a number of things have come together in my brain. So one of them is the Patreon, which I've been enjoying very much. And thank you for your encouragement to push forward in that and not retract. So, but what's interesting is that my Patreon, it's like a smaller number of bigger donors who are super engaged, which is great. I love that. It's been so fun to have that interaction portal. So there's that piece. And being like, it's going to take me 50,000 years to fund my film through this particular mechanism, unless it grows a lot. Second piece is this fucking film club I've been running for 3 years that these women just love. They love it. And it's like, it's so basic. Like I pick a movie or give them 3 options. They vote on it. I spend like 10 minutes at the beginning saying my thoughts on it, or I bring somebody in to talk about it or interview them. And then I give them discussion questions. They go into groups, they have discussions. We come back together for one big discussion. Anyway, but it's like, it's working so well. And I keep just being like, this is so weird. But finally I was like, why is this working? And what can you learn from it for a bigger thing? And then the last thing that came together is, this is all leading somewhere. I'm just telling you the thought threads that came to this. The other thing is I'm now the artistic director of this theater company here. And I'm looking at this company going, nobody expects this company to make money. Like this company gets $500,000 budget every single year because people want a theater company. And they're and they're delighted to just come to the plays. And that's all they want. And they get the tax deduction and nobody has to worry about making, like we sell tickets, but nobody thinks it's going to equal the amount of money. So one day I was out snowshoeing and I was like, why can I not make my films like that? And why do I have to keep going through this emotional hell of like making films I'm so proud of and that reach audiences, but can't make money because of this stupid system. And like, my emotional experience of these films is that I keep failing, but I'm not failing by any of the metrics I actually care about, which is that I'm making movies I really love, that other people really love, and I'm getting them to these people. So I've decided that my next experiment is I'm going to try a nonprofit filmmaking model. And in the model of a theater company, basically, or like how art museums, everything is funded, where people sign up for a tax deductible annual contribution. And they have to commit for at least 3 years, but like bigger amounts than Patreon. But they get a tax deduction, and basically scaling up the Patreon to like be like cooler perks in exchange. And that's what I'm going to try.
Are you forming a nonprofit, or are you associating with a nonprofit?
For the moment, it's going to be a fiscal sponsor.
Yeah. Okay.
If it works really well, then it will make sense to. And there's this Indigenous impact producer in Canada who I've been working with and teaching with a lot, called Charlene Sanjenko, who has started this company. She's been working on this company for a few years called Regen Media that's been kind of like trying to figure out its way. And there's a way that I can plug this into what she's doing. And she's really excited to try this model. And so.
Do you have
I'm going to try.
associated are you still looking for a producer in this?
Yes, sort of, but that suddenly that seems like we have a more leisurely pace with that, because we can run on this.
Because I wonder if the person I'm working on this current feature with, which is an erotic thriller, because her thing is like genre, but I really like working with her a lot. And we were like, we should just do more movies. So if you have the newest script, maybe I can get her to read it.
Okay.
Yeah, but she has like I like her ethos. That's how we started working together, because we like did some projects that were kind of like not well run necessarily, and usually had male producers, which is just a fun theme I've noticed. And we were like, why aren't we getting paid to do the jobs that we're not doing anyway, like in the dark, like for all these guys. And yeah, just like cares about, I know she's like from Chicago and has this very nice like Midwest kind of vibe. And cool. She's just like, we've dealt with some like things on the film too that were like difficult conversations that I think she like dealt with well. And she's very, I was like, oh, you're cool. Like, I want to keep, but yeah, she's great and loves genre-y stuff. But yeah, this erotic thrillers are also like becoming, they're like, seem to be like the new horror. It's what everyone seems to want. Like we've been hit up by like a bunch of sales agents and stuff for this, and it's literally just a log line as far as everyone knows. But everyone's like, let us know, keep us posted, send us things. Like, will you have key art? And we're like, okay. But like everyone wants erotic thrillers suddenly now. So she, yeah, kind of like understands that space a little bit, business wise too. So it might be a good person to talk to.
Cool. Yeah, I'll send you the latest. Thank you.
Erotic thrillers are kind of the new horror is a line, certainly. I'm really intrigued by this idea. Are you familiar with the nonprofit called Impact 100?
No.
So they essentially get 100 women to donate $1,000 a year. And they have chapters all over the country. And they, in that chapter, decide what that money will be used for and give out in grants to people in the local community, whatever they decided their particular areas of focus are going to be for that year. I'm unsure on who decides who wins the grants. It might be the women. I believe it's the entire group of people who then get to decide who will get the grant based on presentations, and there's a big gala. I've been trying to figure out a way to transfer this model to film for a while. I'm dabbling just a little bit with my Patreon in that I'm having a portion of every membership go into a fund. And then that fund gets used as grants for other filmmakers. So that's like the micro version of it. But I wonder if something like that is in getting in contact with those individuals to really see how they run their organizations. Because they only have 100, and that's like a very achievable amount of people. If you can get 100 women who are like, and it doesn't just have to be women, but I think, of course, if you niche down to exactly who you want to reach out to go on that journey of sponsorship over 2 to 3 years.
That's awesome. I'll look them up. And yes, so I figured out that if I can get 100 women at various levels, between $1,250 and $10,000, assuming that more will give at the lower amounts, 100 women to commit that amount per year on an ongoing basis, I can make a film for $750,000 every 3 years. And that's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
I've met with them. I'm trying desperately to find, like, I just searched my email for Impact 100 and it's not showing up, but I've definitely met with someone from this organization. So if I can figure out who I met with, I will try to connect or track them down or something. It's driving me crazy. Would you, because I know when we did the Filmmaker Magazine webinar, you were talking a little bit about fiscal sponsorship and how we can't necessarily use the funds for distribution. And I've dealt with that personally in a film that I left a few years ago about dissolving the relationship and also working with equity. So are you, how does that work out for distribution? Have you figured that out yet?
So we're still talking to people. I think the region media, like having a company that's a nonprofit, may get around this problem because like the film can make money as long as those funds are going to go back into the nonprofit. It's just that people personally can't benefit from, I mean, and actually people can, like, you can agree on like a bump that people will get in their pay, but they can't like infinitely benefit. But a nonprofit company can, because then they just go back in and get as long as they're going back into the nonprofit activities. So my thought is that, I mean, the exciting door that this opens in my brain is like, if you don't have to care about making money, then when you have a finished film, the only question you have to ask is, what is the most exciting way to deliver this film to the community you want to reach in the most impactful way? And that might mean releasing it for free. It might mean doing a Joyful Vampire tour. It might mean like whatever, but like, that's the only place you have to imagine distribution from.
Yeah.
But I do think in doing that, we might stumble into models of distribution that actually do make money. And if that proves to be true, then it could begin shifting to an equity model over time. But at least the experiment that I am conducting is happening with people who don't expect their money back, because I hate that feeling. It feels so funny. And Liz, you know more about distribution than anybody. So if anybody can experiment and win on, and I mean that in like, not that you know more than anybody, but that like you have the smartest like brain about it and the most experience of somebody who's trying to experiment with it. So like,
Thank you.
You know, I totally believe that you can.
No, we might fail. I mean,
right.
And what I was talking to the theatrical booker about, I was like, I want to be everywhere. I don't want to do windows anymore. I don't want to do this bullshit politicking and distribution. And he's like, well, that doesn't work for me. Like, theaters need holdbacks. Unless you want to four-wall every single engagement you have, you're going to have to play by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm already kind of like taking step backwards from innovation in how I'm thinking too, in that like, I can't just be everywhere all at once, you know?
You can if you don't show at theaters.
What?
You can if you don't show at theaters.
But for some reason I've decided my entire distribution strategy is based off of theatrical right now.
But Liz, I think there's a difference between doing a holdback for theatrical and doing these holdback windows online.
I hope so. And then I could go immediately on AVOD and TVOD.
Exactly. Right. Because that's where we ran into problems with Bite Me, is that like, once you're marketing to the online universe, it's really fucking complicated to then be like, well, you can only watch it here or not in your country, or, you know, like that's when it. But if you're like, we're just showing in theaters in these cities, I think that's a different thing.
And I think we're going to also be doing virtual theatrical in the digital space afterwards too. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I feel like I took energy away from what you were saying. I think that's really exciting. I think that's genuinely really exciting. It sounds ideal. Like, sounds beautiful.
And maybe it won't work, but I've decided to moonshot it. Like, that's just what I would like, is to make a film for $750,000 every 3 years and not have to worry about making money back.
Oh, and that budget is heaven. I like, because we just reduced our budget to 400, and I'm like, 750. Oh, that's so good.
No, I mean, like, if I could do that for the rest of my life, I would die a happy woman. That is a totally fine budget.
Just don't shoot in LA.
What'd you say?
What?
If you don't shoot in LA.
If you don't shoot in LA. I have no desire to shoot in LA. No offense to anyone.
No, we didn't. The one we're on, we didn't want to shoot in LA because we were like, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to shoot in LA. Like, the number of times that I've talked to Film LA makes me want to scream. And like, the location we have is the house in Beverly Hills. The house is in Film LA. The rest of the neighborhood is Beverly Hills. So we have to follow like 2 coding rules. And it's like a whole fun, it's like everything is a nightmare. And like, we've had to tow people. I get yelled at by people that we've towed. Like, it's just a mess. And I was like, why are we shooting here? It's a house. We could have got a house in Louisiana and gotten a tax credit, and people would have been nicer. Like, yeah, don't shoot in LA. I was like, unless there's a lot of money, LA is really rough. Unless you're like very I don't know, like specific about it, but yeah, I was like, I'm very over LA right now shooting here. They were like, you need a fire safety officer. They're $120 an hour and you need them the whole time you're there. And I was like, what if we're not shooting? What if we get rid of the generator? What if we get rid of posted parking? And they're like, yep, that's just what it is. And no, you can't talk to anyone about it. And so I've just been arguing with them every day. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. And also that's like $26,000 that you're telling me like in the middle of my shoot that I now have to pay. Like, I don't have that kind of money. I did a whole, I was like, well, then I'm gonna have to fire people and then it's gonna be less safe on set. So you having a random dude in my driveway that's supposed to make us safer is actually making it worse. And they were like, we don't care. I was like, okay, fine, I tried. So yeah. Anyway, that's been my last 2 weeks. And then they went away. Then they magically decided they didn't need to be there anymore. But it was like for a while we were like, well, we might be like crazy over budget and not be able to afford post anymore, but we won't know until some random magical human decides our fate in an office somewhere that I'm not allowed to contact. So yeah, shoot in Idaho. I got someone who got my phone number from Film LA2 whose car we towed has like contacted me every day. And I'm like, I can't, if you don't know how to read, man, like I can't. He's like, you owe me $400 for towing. And I'm like, no, I'm so sorry. Like, sorry. It's been fun. Yeah. But like whenever bad things happen on set, I like text my producer. I'm like, you know where else has a tax credit? Maine, it's 17%. And she's like,
I want to hear updates from Courtney and Alicia, and I just looked at the clock and we've got 10 minutes. So let's pivot.
My little endeavor to get my feet wet with directing by doing a little short film first before a feature has become way more complicated because when I wrote the script, I had zero intention of directing it. Or maybe even making it. I just wrote it for fun because it felt like I needed to write it. And now that I'm actually in the process of producing it, I'm like, what was I thinking when I wrote this script? I had determined before I did a budget, I had decided for myself that I was going to spend 10K on it. Now that I've done the budget, it looks like more like 25K. And I'm like, that if I want to pay people, of course. You know, I could do it for less, but I want to actually pay people. So now it becomes this issue of it's a short film. There are not many avenues for short films to make money. If I'm going to spend that amount of money making this film, what is the purpose beyond gaining experience for myself? Having this film exist, yes, that would be great, but I actually do want to make money. So I'm in the process now of figuring out what kind of alternative means can I use to both raise funds for this film and self-distribute a short film as someone would a feature film. And what can I add in value, not theatrically, but what can I add in value so that it's not like, well, I'm seeing a 15, 20-minute movie. I'm not going to pay, I'm not going to pay $10, $15 to do that. That's what I've been struggling with for the past week or so since I figured out what the budget was looking like, because the entire thing takes place in a diner, and spoiler alert, not cheap to shoot in a diner.
Unless you come to Idaho, just saying.
I looked at Idaho. I do actually have a location in Idaho that I was like, I have to talk to Naomi about this because I had to start looking outside of.
Yeah, my town has an amazing diner, like old school.
I wonder if it's the one that I found online. Tell you.
Okay.
This is such a dumb question. I should know the answer to this. Do you have lakes in Idaho? You don't have
we got lakes coming out of our ears in Idaho. You have to hike to a lot.
You don't have an incentive, right? You don't have a tax incentive?
No, but
I love that.
everything's cheap. You can shoot anywhere you want. Nobody cares.
Cool.
And people are like so excited to be involved in a movie that they'll give you stuff for free.
Cool.
Yeah.
I know someone who's maybe putting a thing or like budgets together, and I was like, and it's all set on like a lake front, like in a house. Okay. I'll tell them Idaho. That's why I started looking at all the credits for everything. And then I was like, just to rub it in, like, hey, you know where else you could be? Cool. Also the virtual screening thing I did for my short, highly recommend. And I feel like you could pre-sell tickets to an event like that too, to like pay for it before is like, would be an interesting thing to test. So like, you know what you would have.
That is in the preliminary plans, is the virtual screenings. Also, pancakes and milkshakes play a big part in the story. So I'm thinking about live events taking place at diners, thinking about milkshake shops, thinking about pancake socials, any kind of thing that can tie back into the story itself to sort of eventize the film.
You could probably do the cooking show version of like the company did virtual events out. They did a few like executive like events for some of the studios where a celebrity chef would like make the thing, like walk you through how to make something like a cooking show essentially. But they got, in this case, like they got the box of like the fancy ingredients and everything, but you could also mail like the little ingredient card, like the recipe card ahead of time. But it could be someone from the cast like making the pancakes and you make it like with them at home. So those are like also little like event type things you could do, and it would be pretty cheap to either mail or email like cute little like recipe cards and be like, get your ingredients ready like 4 days away from, you know, making pancakes with whoever. So you can set up stuff like that too, that you don't have to like have a space for.
Mhm. That's a great idea.
Just to ask the question, should you just turn it into a feature?
Yes, that too.
So this has been a conversation. This has been a conversation. I have not made a decision yet, but it is something that I'm thinking about. It's like, if I'm going to do all of this, why not just do the feature? Because the short is literally just the first act of the film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Feature.
So it's a conversation that is happening.
As the queen of making short films, I'm now over shorts. Although the Barcelona one we did cut it into a short. It's like 14 minutes and change. And also, if anyone wants to watch it and tell me if you know what's going on in the movie, I need feedback at the current cut. But yeah, I'm like, damn it, I made a proof of concept again, like an idiot. But here we are. Don't make a short, just make a feature. It's just as much work, especially if you're gonna eventize it. It's so much work. You're like, oh,
It is.
send an email.
But the whole point was to get my feet with directing. That was the point.
Honestly, it's not that much different. It's just like more time. And I don't know that shorts necessarily always, if you have like a good DP that you have a good like rapport and shorthand with, it's like having AD'd a lot of like first feature directors. Short experience is like good to find your like aesthetic and so forth, if it's even in that same world. But I feel like it's really just being able to like be on set for 12 hours a day for like a long run, which you're not learning how to do on a short film anyway, and working with a DP. So if you have a DP who's like more experienced and like understands like the rhythm of a feature, and a good AD who understands the rhythm of a feature, it really doesn't, I don't think you're learning like vastly that much more that like doing a short and then doing a feature like the next year.
Well, I understand the inkling to do this. I mean, like I came out of film school having never really made a short, and then I made my first feature afterwards because I was documentary. Mm-hmm. So I would have benefited from more practice and more experience. And I have been workshopping this idea in my mind for you, Alicia. And it's like, could you have a dry run day where you get the DP and your 2 actors and you and maybe one other crew person, maybe production designer, and it's like more than a rehearsal, but less than a film shoot. And it's like, maybe you shoot it on an iPhone with plans to never cut it together, but you just execute a shot list that day and work with your actors so that it's practice for you.
Mhm.
And it's a minor commitment from these team members who will see it as rehearsal for the feature. I know what it's like to feel like you want to have something under your belt, so to speak, before you do something bigger. And it might make you feel more confident too.
That's a good idea, Liz. Thank you. Courtney, what's up with you?
Okay. Well, so Kelly, who's producing this feature, and I sent her the script for Baby Moon because I was like, well, you're a producer and I see you. I talk to her literally like 20 hours a day. So I was like, you want to read this script I've got? And she's horror, so I was like surprised that she really liked it. But she's like, yeah, let's make it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then this producer who also is more of like a genre person, so very confusing, who I did something he PM'd last year, also wants to come on board, and he has a lot of connections for whatever reason in Europe with like European film commissions and so forth. And he has a project that's at one of the pavilions at Cannes that just won the thing at South by. So it's in like the genre pavilion this year. So they're now producing this movie, which is cool, but it's definitely like a more traditional model than any of the scheming that we've done. So Kelly has like two agencies, or an agency and a sales agent, who are like actively looking for projects from her. So my plan is to finish the deck today and see if they can package it, which is like, so I feel like contradictory to so many of the things that we've talked about in this. But yeah, that would be the idea, is to, so we're talking to a few like people in like the Greek film world, and then Nico and I are both going to be at Cannes. So we'll try to go annoy people who know it's up there. It is like, I guess, non-traditional in that it's more of a prestige project too. Like we're going to put in like a box office, comp thing in the deck. And then we're like, that's not really what this movie is about. And like none of the comps really like made enough money that you're like, ooh, but they've been nominated for like Oscars and like won things at Cannes and like have more prestige, like SAG awards and that kind of thing. So they're like, well, if that's what we're going for, and that's the kind of like audience or investors we're looking for, they don't really care about that, which is the other reason to like try to tap into European funding, because it's tax money. So that's the current plan, is to see how far we get in the next month with these agencies, which is like sales agents that have been like courting her for whatever reason. Yeah, it's very confusing to me in general, because it's like two people talking for this movie. So it's weird how like interested producers and people have been reading it. And I don't know if it's because of all the sex in the film that makes it interesting or like what, but I'm like, why do people keep following up on this script where it's like two people on vacation? It's good, but hopefully like the industry people that she hits up will be also interested. I think also if there's like this writer strike, which seems like it's going to happen tomorrow, actors will be like even more interested in being involved in something that's like a vehicle. If it's like, yeah, we're trying to make this like come on the film, EP, huge eye roll, but here we go. Like put your banner on the movie, go after all the awards. That's the kind of movie we're trying to make. So that's like the current plan. So she's working on like casting grids, and we'll see how that goes. So if that's the route we take and it's like a bigger production than I thought it was going to be, than just like tricking people into going on vacation with me with a camera, then the main focus in terms of like this group is like the transparency of like what that actually looks like and how things get made like that, because I feel like no one actually knows the answer and it's this like giant big mystery. So would want to get the people being part of the project like on board with like, hey, this is a thing I'm going to talk about. And if there's the funding too, to like shoot like 10-hour days to have like talk about what prep looks like and what does it mean when your actors are EPs, because I feel like that's another like weird muddy part of the industry currently where like no one really knows and like people take advantage of that. in bad ways, when I think there could be like positive ways to do that. So yeah, that's the current stage. So we'll see if that works. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go up with a new plan. But yeah, she's like, yeah, like these people and these people, they're like asking for projects. Can I send them? I was like, send it to anyone. I don't care. Like anyone can read this movie. Go for it. I need money. So yeah, send it, and send it to all your friends. Yeah.
I think this is fantastic what's happening, because like this group is going to turn into a 4-way experiment, which is like the best, that's it's like what Liz and I were calling for in our article. Like everyone just has to try stuff, right? Nothing's working.
Yeah.
So like, so if we can keep being transparent no matter which route we go, I think to me that seems like an amazing thing to happen.
Yeah, I think that's the goal, and how the credits work and so forth. Because that would be because we'd go for the Greek like incentive. So we'd be like, okay, we shot here to get this, but then what does it mean? Because yeah, I feel like so many things are like, oh, you can do this thing, and everyone's like, how do you do it? Where are these people hiding? So yeah. But the budget's way bigger than the original. Like once you like put in all the things you need to be able to like, because that's the balance too, where it's like I had the $400,000 version and now it's like 1.2 before the credit, because you're like, well, then you have to pay the actors a lot more, which means you also you need a UPM and or line producer, and you need like the wardrobe has to do this and that, like all the things that like come with it, which is another thing I feel like people don't talk about in the jump between like indie scrappy stuff and then like, well, like the article talks about too, like if you have actors who are used to certain things, then you have to provide these things, but that costs money. So like, what does that mean or look like? And how do you cast actors who will actually understand what, because that's still considered a low budget movie. So like, how do you hire the right team for that too? Yeah.
We had a question, right, Liz?
Yeah, but yes, it's for Naomi mainly, but I mean, check our chat, Naomi.
Oh, sorry. Could the Impact 100 bottle be used like an investment club to move it into for-profit? Totally. Yeah, you could absolutely do the subscription model with investment. I just would like a break from being responsible for making people money back.
I want a break from having to do all of the work. I think that's what appealed to me about this model as well, where I was like, I just do everything. Like I have to do most of the producing on my own stuff, and then like doing it for this. So I'm like, I'm just kind of like tired of making spreadsheets for people. Like this is another person's job, or should be. Like, so I was like, oh great, you want to do the thing and do the, and I don't have to. Okay, great. I don't want to worry about like where people are parking for Baby Moon, or like who's providing craft service. Like I just don't want to do that anymore. Like, which is maybe like a very bratty thing to feel, but I just like, I'm too tired to do that right now.
Well, and I think that's fair.
It's totally fair. And like if we can each embark on these various experiments holding to our core principles that we wrote together, then the question of how do you apply those in all of these different situations can also be a really interesting experiment. Like at what point does that become impossible if you move inside the system, or does it, or are there actually ways to
yeah, it's like the only way to change the system, I feel like, is if people like come into it with a different ethos.
Well, that I wholly disagree with, but I think you can build a different system. But I do think that there's value in people going inside and trying to mess with things there too.
We're past time and we are meeting next week, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But I am unavailable the 14th. So I wonder if we could have a quick scheduling call before we close this out. Do we want to, I mean, I think we've been leaning more towards every 2 weeks because we don't have concrete updates every single week for each other. But 3 weeks feels long again, so.
Well, suddenly it seems like we have,
Does the 13th instead of the 14th work?
I can do the 13th.
I could do that. Yeah, I also don't, I think 3 weeks would be okay.
I mean, I'm open to 3 weeks if everyone wants to do 3 weeks. I didn't know how people were feeling.
I will be at Cannes on the 21st, so time
Oh,
wise might be tricky. I also like have no idea what I'm doing there yet, which is bad, but we'll figure it out. I was like, I really need to make plans and meet. Oh, it's in like 2 weeks. Cool. So
so we're thinking 4 p.m. On the 13th Pacific. Does that work for everyone, or are we thinking no?
I don't know if that's gonna work for me.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Let me
Yeah.
look at something really quick.
We can also do this via email if anyone feels they're being like pressured into figuring it out at this moment. Which is something I noticed.
The 13th. I have to check. I have an event that day. I have to check for when it finishes. I'm not quite sure yet.
Should we move it to the 13th now and then move it potentially to before Cannes if that doesn't work out, just so we have a placeholder for right now? And
Yeah, that sounds good.
okay, so just let us know, Alicia, what works for you when you know. Okay.
Great.
Yay,
All right,
we had
y'all.
people watching. People watched us. So much. Actually, if you guys go to the YouTube page, there are views on our videos now that aren't just me watching it. Other people watching it now too. So check them out. There might be comments. I don't even know.
Never read the comments.
Don't read the Don't check those out.
Not on YouTube.
All right, y'all.
and now
Bye.
you get updated.